This is the second lesson on how to get a grade 9 in AQA English Language Paper 1 question 3, the structure question, and we are looking at the November 2020 paper. From 2026, you may know this question has changed slightly, and you're asked how, instead of how the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader, it's going to ask you to focus on a particular effect. In this case, I've rewritten the question, how has the writer structured the text to create a sense of mystery? So all your responses need to be focused on that effect. So this is the rewritten format. You now need to think about the whole of the source. That's the whole of the text. The text is from the beginning of a novel. How has the writer structured the text to create a sense of mystery? You could write about what the writer focuses your attention on at the beginning of the source, how and why the writer changes this focus as the source develops, and any other structural features that create mystery. Okay, so this is the extract. I won't read it out to you again. I read it in the last lesson, but I will leave it on the screen so that you can read it to yourself. So you might want to pause the video, read it to yourself carefully, and as you're reading it, have a highlighter and pick out any structural devices that create a sense of mystery. Remember, we're looking at structural devices, not language devices. So structure is where the writer is focusing your attention, what they choose to include and where. Okay, so have a read of that. Pause the video and come back. And this is the next one. You can get this paper from the AQA website, the final part of the extract. Okay, so a quick examiner's note. What the examiners are looking for is precision. They don't want vague comments like, this made me want to read on, or this created tension. It's too vague. That you want to pick out 2 or 3 key structural features and explain exactly how they create mystery. So yes, why some students struggle. They use common vague phrases, it makes me want to read on, it builds tension, but these do not show examiner level analysis. What you need to do instead is you need to use structural terminology. So the opening, the shift, foreshadowing, cyclical structure, linking the beginning, the middle and the end, and connecting all of these techniques to the way the sense of mystery is created. So let's move on. So I would always recommend you go through the passage in chronological order. So look at the opening first. So obviously that's where the writer chooses to begin the narrative. And sometimes writers will use ordinary beginnings to make the later disruption feel more surprising. It creates a sense of contrast, and writers love to use contrast. So the opening is quite ordinary, isn't it? Rosie is at the sink, she's washing up, it's an everyday routine, it's ordinary life. And then there's a sudden shift in focus. It focuses to the garden. And there's this description, and the garden's made to seem somewhat sinister. She spots the girl first, then there's the description of the garden, then obviously she there's the focus on the stranger child. She goes out, and the child's disappeared. So that's a quick summary of the structure. So now we need to really think about that and analyze it. Why start in this way? Why start with Rosie standing at the sink, staring out at the garden? Yes, it creates a sense of contrast. I said that already, between the normality and the disturbance. And writers always love to create contrast in their writing. I always describe it as a bit like artists when they're painting a picture. If it's all monotone, if it's all sort of one shade, there's no light and dark, the picture's a bit flat, isn't it? So contrast is used to create an effect. And here, the contrast between the normality and the disturbance makes this appearance of the girl seem almost more strange, almost more mysterious. It heightens the sense of mystery. So in whatever passage you're looking at, look to see if the writer has used contrast, and then think about what's the effect. Yeah, so the reader at the beginning is lulled into a sort of a sense of security, and it makes that later mystery more powerful. That's exactly right, isn't it? The mystery comes from the disruption. The ordinary, there's beginning, we've got the ordinary life, the uncanny setting, and then the unexplained character. So I would pause the video now and write one sentence. How does the ordinary opening make the later appearance of the strange child, the strange girl, more unsettling? So see if you can pause the video and write a sentence about that. Okay, you might start something like the writer opens with a very mundane, ordinary setting with Rosie standing at the sink, staring at the garden, which makes or which enhances the mystery of the child suddenly appearing seemingly from nowhere. Okay, so another technique which I would really suggest that you look at is foreshadowing. So foreshadowing is when there are early details in the passage which hint at what will come later. It prepares, in this case, it prepares the reader for strangeness, building unease before the event. So here we've got the garden description. The wintry sun hung low in the sky, and the gnarled growth threw long twisted shadows across the undergrowth within its cage. So this does create an atmosphere of menace before the child arrives. Now, you have to be careful. This is a structure question, not the language question. And I know we looked at this particular quotation when we were analysing the language. Here, you're analysing the structure. Why has the writer included this description at this point? With structure, it's why does the writer include what they write about, where they write about it? That's the important thing. So here they're deliberately creating an atmosphere of slightly, maybe menace is too strong a word, but a slightly unsettling atmosphere. Now, I think technically the child had already arrived. I think she'd actually already been seen. Let's just have a little look at that. A little girl, yeah, so that before right at the beginning, when she opened her eyes, another child was there. Yes, very short sentence, just that suddenly she's got her eyes shut, she opens her eyes, and then suddenly this child there appears almost out of nowhere. So that's something shocking, surprising, and it contrasts with this scene here, which is just the children playing, and it's a very normal, everyday scene, isn't it? Sam was kneeling on the patch of earth. It's just a car was toddling from bush to bush, and Rosie's just watching them from the distorted glass. So they're sort of, the rounded glass is making them look slightly distorted, as if she's looking through ripples. So it's a little detail included there that makes them look slightly unusual. And she closes her eyes, she opens them again, and then suddenly this child is here. Then we go into this description of the garden, which helps create this sense of slight unease, doesn't it? This snarled with tangle ivy, like a gigantic malformed hand, with its knuckles in the earth. And then we get some close-up detail of this little girl. So that is the structure. Okay, so the sinister imagery of the garden foreshadows the strange child. Yes, because although we've been introduced to the girl before the description of the garden, we haven't had any details, have we? And the description of the girl is slightly odd, isn't it? Her appearance is not normal. What she's wearing, also the way she's described. So all of the way the setting is described, I think, is a structural device to heighten this sense of the uncanny, of something slightly odd. I mean, the writer's thinking, how can I make this feel slightly mysterious? The mystery is heightened because the environment itself seems to predict her. It seems it almost prepares us for this mysterious appearance. So have a think about this question. What mood do these images create before the child even appears? Okay, so pause the video, have a go at answering that question. And then we come into repetition and patterns. So often writers do use this idea of repetition of ideas or images to build patterns, because patterns often signal significance. In this case, it's sort of to make the reader feel uneasy. So there's a repeated focus on darkness and shadows, long twisted shadows, sense of confinement within its cage. We looked at that the other day. We were looking at question 2. And then the sudden absence of the girl. And all of this together helps create this sense of mystery. So the repetition links the different parts of the extract together. Each recurrence of darkness, confinement deepen the mystery. And then there's the cyclical pattern. The girl appears suddenly, out of nowhere, and then disappears suddenly, and there's no explanation. So that structural decision of the way she appears and then disappears, again, that heightens the mystery. And as readers, we aren't given the answer to that. We don't know. It raises questions in our mind, doesn't it? It helps us. It forces us to think, well, who is this girl? Is she even real? Where's she gone? Where's she come from? So all of that helps create that sense of mystery. So have a go at this task. Find one repeated idea, perhaps darkness, entrapment, or sudden change, and write about how it adds mystery. So you could talk about the sudden appearance of the girl and sudden disappearance. Okay, have a go at writing a sentence on that. I'll pause the video and come back. So tracking the structure. So the beginning, we've got the ordinary opening, Rosie at the sink. We've got the foreshadowing through the sinister description of the garden. And then we've got patterns of repetition and unresolved disappearance. And all of these 3 work together to create the sense of mystery. So when you're writing your response, do use structural terminology. So things like the writer opens with, then shifts, foreshadows, repeats, ends with. We've also got a shift sometimes from the external to description to the internal. We had that when we were inside the mind of Rosie. I can just zip back to that. Well, yes, so here we are. Where on earth had she come from? She must be a neighbour's child, but how had she got in? So here we are shifting to getting an insight on what is going on in Rosie's mind. And you can think, why does the writer do that? Why does the writer want us to have an insight into what she's thinking? Why does the writer want us to see it from Rosie's viewpoint? Maybe it's because the writer wants us to feel the same shock and surprise as Rosie's feeling. It draws us into the text, helps us to experience the mystery in the same way that Rosie's experiencing it. Okay, and so all 3 work together to build mystery. So linked to the effect, you really must always, don't just spot the structural devices, you need to explain what effect they have. It creates a sense of mystery because, just the same as you do in language, when you're picking out similes or metaphors, you're not just saying this is a simile, you're saying, why has the writer used it? You keep coming back to the writer's intention. What effect does it have on the reader? So here's a snippet from a grade 9 response. The writer structures the text to create mystery by opening with Rosie's ordinary routine before shifting to the unsettling garden. This contrast heightens the shock of the girl's sudden appearance. Foreshadowing through sinister images like twisted shadows prepares the reader for something uncanny, while the repeated ideas of darkness and entrapment reinforce the theme of confinement. Finally, the girl's disappearance mirrors her abrupt arrival, leaving the mystery unresolved. Together, these choices sustain an atmosphere of unease throughout the passage. Okay, so it's using precise terminology, foreshadowing, opening, repetition. It's tracking from the beginning to the middle to the end. It's always linking to the effect in the question, which in this case is mystery. So altogether, a very strong response. It's not a full response. You'd need to look at other devices, but have a look at my other video on this question. It'll give you some other devices. And if you want some more help, download my free Paper 1 Top Tips Guide. The link is in the description, and subscribe to the channel. So the next question we'll be looking at on this paper will be question 4. So thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.